are just joining, please be reminded that we would like to mute our microphones, and you will be able to interact by posting questions and comments in chat, and our moderators during the day will pick up on the questions and comments in the chat and share them with our speakers. And so hopefully we'll be able to overcome some of the extreme awkwardness of the Zoom type discussion. So my name is Mark Kenuel. I'm director of the Institute for the Humanities at UIC. And first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone back, or rather into or forward into the strange new reality that we're in, hopefully not to last too terribly long. And I hope that everyone is staying well and healthy in mind, body, and spirit, or as well as can be managed. I want to make a really quick and heartfelt thanks to our Associate Director, Linda Vavra, who has been so instrumental. Hi, Linda, thank you so much for all of this. Linda has been so helpful in pulling all of this together. You know, we're humanists, we're not technology people. We don't do this stuff. This is not our wheelhouse, but Linda has really stepped up and gotten us to not only make do, but really function incredibly well in this new environment. So kudos to you, Linda. And I also want to thank our participants, our incredible students in the Engaged Humanities Initiative, our faculty members. Many of these conversations, yes, yay! Many of these conversations began way in advance of our planning this event, but we realized because of these conversations that were simmering, we should organize an event around our students and our faculty who have been responding with their humanities work to some of the issues that are surrounding us at the moment. I also want to take a moment to thank Professor Laura Hostetler, and I have so much gratitude for her. She was our interim director at the Institute during the spring semester when all of the pandemic hit us, and she has really been a hero in keeping the Institute going and providing leadership during this. And she was also a co-organizer for this summer. So she continues to be an interlocutor during this, and I'm so grateful to her. So let's, give her a round of applause too. If only we could have just like a really big room. But I hope you're feeling all of the good vibes over the airwaves, Laura. So our sessions today, I just want to speak a little bit about it to set things up and then hand things over to Ellen and our students. Our sessions today touch on various aspects of the pressures that we've been facing recently, but often differentially facing during the last 6 months. And this summit is an effort to spark conversation about the role of the humanities in addressing a moment in which violence and crisis surround us. The recent escalation of police violence and more violence asserted against resistance is inseparable from the near total collapse of our responsible public discourse and our public health system in the face of a global pandemic. And this shows just how desperately we need a moment for human discursive action and institutional action in the face of these pressures. But this isn't a moment only for thinking about the way that humanities can be mobilized, although certainly we're going to be doing plenty of that. I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk about the vulnerability of humanities discourse itself to these changes that are surrounding us. That is, I think that we can talk about the way that our ideas about what the humanities are and what the humanities can do perhaps have been changed by recent events and the conversations that have arisen around them. And another way of saying this, and this comes partly by way of speaking with a lot of you about these issues, is that we might want to start thinking about the humanities even more than ever. Not that we haven't been doing this before, but thinking about the humanities as a kind of flexible vulnerability and responsiveness. This isn't the same as talking about the humanities in crisis, you know, or the terrible things that are happening to the humanities, which elicit kind of a collective yawn. I mean, what's, I think, more interesting, more important for a moment is to think about the humanities and its mobility and empathetic shifting in relation to what is happening in the world around us. This includes talking about the humanities and us as humans as vulnerable to inaction, to stress, to trauma. These are subjects that have been going on for a long time, but this renews our interest in the humanities and these ways of talking about the humanities and horror. This is a moment when many of us are absolutely struck by terror, by distraction, by depression, and so on. And as our last panel will explore, this can also be a time for mobilizing and creativity, finding new partners, planning new actions, and this is going to be something that will come up during our day together. Lauren Berlant, in one of her many books, talks about crisis as a moment of transition in search of new genres. And so I was realizing that part of what we're doing today is talking about new genres, new ways of talking together in response to our current moment. So I'm going to hand things over to Professor Ellen McClure to introduce our incredible students today. Ellen is director of the Engaged Humanities Initiative. She's also a professor of French. And she has published a brilliant new book, which I read over the summer, called The Logic of Idolatry in 17th Century French Literature. There it is. Professor Hostetler is holding it up. I don't have my prop with me. And at 12:30, we'll take a break and return at 1 p.m. for our next session. So Ellen, I'll let you take over from here.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. And I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with the Engaged Humanities Initiative. And so I'll outline that in just a minute, but first I'm going to take a minute to thank Mark Canuel once again, who has been an incredible partner in this and keeping everything going, and Linda Bavra at the Institute, even at a distance, super wonderful and helpful. The Engaged Humanities Initiative is a Mellon-funded grant, and our provost, Susan Poser, is the PI on the grant, and so I'd like to thank her for making all of this possible and getting the ball rolling. Other big university partners who've been super helpful, Joey Volpe and Sarah Hall, Marisol Mastrangelo, our wonderful program coordinator, who's now full-time in the first gen program because she's so wonderful, but she continues to be helpful for all of us. Margot Brown, who is just a fantastic partner in all of this and keeping everything running as well. And I know the students have appreciated. She's played a huge role in our check-in sessions all summer for the initiative. And then everybody, some of you, I did take a peek at the list of participants. If you've taught for the initiative, if you've talked to me about the initiative, if you've come to working group meetings, if you're just generally sympathetic to the initiative, thank you so much. You really make the initiative go and inspire all of us. And very much huge thanks to all the mentors. We had about 13 students who did summer projects over the summer, and I'll say a little bit more about what that involves in just a minute. But the faculty mentors have been just played such a crucial role. I know the students as well are incredibly grateful to to their mentors. And of course, the students are, you'll see in just a minute. I'm going to try to be brief because rightfully they should take center stage on all of this. This is about them and for them, and they've really been doing great work in really difficult circumstances this summer, and starting to explore what humanities research means, what research means in this context. Yeah, so I'll just say a little bit about the initiative. So the EHI is a 4-year program. This is the students who you're going to be hearing from in just a minute are our very first, they're about to enter their 3rd year in the program and at UIC. And so they've just completed the very first summer of funded humanities research. In an ideal non-pandemic world, there would have been study abroad and internships and all sorts of in-person activities, but we pivoted and made the best of a difficult situation, again, very much with the help of the mentors. And I think as you'll hear, a common theme through the presentations and through the summer is really emphasizing the engaged nature of the engaged humanities. That engaged means working in partnership with each other, thinking less about what we have to teach other people and more about what we have to learn from each other and what's going on in the world around us. The students filed research plans at the beginning of the summer or the end of the semester, and in many ways, their journey might have taken them really far away from where they thought they would be now, and that's actually part of the process. That's actually success from an engaged point of view, is really letting what's going on in the world, letting the research, letting your reading, letting these encounters with various materials and themes, letting those shift you and impact you and change your trajectory. And that's what's happening all the time. This has been a summer of interconnection, where really realizing our connectedness with one another in the world around us has become really imperative and very, maybe even more urgent or more manifest than it usually is. And also it's been a summer, as picking up on what Mark said, for humanities. You know, I looked this morning and 172,000 deaths in the United States from COVID today, 1,205 since yesterday. And each one of those is a life. And I think back to the New York Times, the front page of the New York Times, way back when it was just 100,000, and they had the phrases from the obituaries, right? Cancer survivor born in the Philippines, great-grandmother with an easy laugh, ordained minister, former nurse. And so as Mark said, you know, the humanities and humanity has never been more urgent. We're aware that many of those deaths have come from what we call essential workers, whether meat packers, janitorial staff, transit workers, medical professionals. I don't think any of us at this point in the summer have been unaffected, some more closely than others. And a disproportionate number of these lives cut short are Black lives. And serving as further reminder, our country and communities rest on the systemic and deliberate violence against Black life and Black humanity. And so just, you know, taking a moment to just take a deep breath and acknowledge, as Mark said, the trauma that's impacted so many of us in all sorts of ways. And letting that trauma inform our work and direct it. Maybe it changes the questions we're asking. Maybe it changes how we ask them a little bit. Maybe it changes who we talk to. And it's just been a joy and a privilege to work with the students over the summer and watch them navigate all of this. We've had some broken bones. We've had some personal crises. We've had health issues, obviously emotional issues. Some of the students have participated in the uprisings in Chicago. Some of them have participated directly and indirectly. Again, none of us is the same as we were just 3 months ago. And one of the students said in an end of semester reflection forum, and it's nobody here, so I'm not going to embarrass you here. She said, once I grasped the concept that we're all humans, every aspect of life became less daunting. And another student said about it, we had check-in sessions all summer long where we would check in with each other. And another student said that it was really uplifting to hear everybody's thoughts and find a sense of community. And she said, I didn't think of sharing knowledge in these times as a really effective way of building hope and inspiration, that our work is not futile in these times, but rather necessary. So I'm just going to turn it over to the wonderful students in the Engaged Humanities Initiative. They'll be continuing next year. Some of them will stay with their mentors. Some of them their projects have shifted. We'll be looking for new mentors and new ways for them to continue their research into next year. They'll have another summer of funding after next year, maybe with some study abroad possibilities. But once again, it's really a privilege. And so I'm going to introduce our first student presenter, who is Chelsea Berganos, who will kick us off. And I'll keep an eye on the chat. We'll have questions after everybody's presented. We'll open it up to questions, but I'll also be monitoring the chat and taking notes of questions as well. So.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Can, yes.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so my name is Chelsea Berganos. I am an Engaged Humanities Initiative student. I am going into my junior year in the Applied Psychology program. I'm also minoring in Sociology and Global Asian Studies. And my major and my minors really go into the topic that I'm going to be talking about today, which is my research topic. I'm going to share my screen now. Let me make sure that I do this right. Okay. Can you guys see that? Okay. Let me make sure this is right. Okay. So my topic for my research right now really focuses on young Filipino immigrants and Filipino Americans in the Chicagoland area, specifically the ones that have suffered from mental health disorders. I basically want to learn about how their process went while seeking mental health services, from telling their parental figures to seeking help. I really want to find answers to like what they went through, how has our culture influenced this experience, and what their opinion is on our culture and mental health. And I basically want to know what their story is. So like big picture, big picture, I want to find out how the colonization of the Philippines hundreds of years ago has affected the mental health of Filipino people, and if any of these patterns have shown if it moved transgenerationally. And the topics that I've been focusing on this summer have been in a realm of mental health in the Filipino community and Philippine history. The reason why I'm interested in this topic of mental health in the Filipino community is because of the little awareness there is on it generally and in the Filipino community. And I've personally struggled with mental health for a long time. And I recovered about like 2 years ago. And after taking my first humanities class with Professor Nadine Neighbor, who introduced me to the term transgenerational trauma, I found myself thinking about the idea of trauma transferring through generations. Since that class, it's been an idea that I found myself thinking about all the time. Until I got to my second humanities class with Professor Hostetler, and she really encouraged me to explore the idea more. So I wrote a paper called "It's My Baggage Now," where I talked about the first time I acknowledged my mental health with my parents, and how I realized how critical it was to address the mental health stigma in Filipino households. Because like living in the Philippines, was about surviving for many people, which is why this internal battle that my people of the Filipino community are going through should go unnoticed and should not go unnoticed and not be silent. And I just think that we should learn about our history so we can better understand what could possibly be a major reason why the Filipino community suffers from mental health issues and why we don't talk about it. I really think that we need to unpack the emotional baggage that, generations before us have handed down and our immigrant parents and grandparents have failed to unpack before it got to us. So with that, my summer research with EHI really was an independent study for me. I got to work with the amazing professor Ana Guevara, who is the director of Global Asian Studies at UIC. And connecting with her has been amazing because she really was my dream mentor for this project. When I found out who she was and read about some of the research she's done, it just made sense to me. Besides knowing so much about the Philippine history and being well connected with organizations that help the Filipino community in Chicago, she really influenced me to discover my identity as a Filipino woman. She gave me a list of readings to do this summer that I included in this PowerPoint that I was very determined to get through, and I got through very slowly, but I finished it. But from what she gave me, I can finally understand the Philippine history that was written in books rather than the one I was taught to by my dad. I was caught off guard several times when a reading started to talk about depression and anxiety because my dad convinced me that it just didn't exist until he came to America. One of the readings that I really loved, and which was my first reading, was called America is in the Heart by Carlos Bulusan. This book was basically a personal history of the author where he describes his early years of boyhood in the Philippines to his voyage to America, telling stories of many years of hardship and despair as a laborer in a rural east part of the Philippines. Reading about this book was very nostalgic for some reason until I realized how similar it was to my dad's story, a story I grew up hearing several times a year. Not only did the books have several personal connections to my dad's immigrant story, it helped me better understand the dynamic in the Philippines, which I would describe as like where the family puts all their hope into one kid or all their children by sacrificing all they have, all they've got for them to get an education to later take care of the rest of the family. So definitely this summer was one for the books with everything that's been going on. There have been many times where I had to put my research on pause to pay attention to today's current events with the Black Lives Matter movement and listen to the voices that have stepped up at a time like this. I found myself at times unsure of how I could do my part to support the movement beyond donating and sharing information. And when I saw the organization of FIRE that I had been planning on interning with, really stand up and show their solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and the Black community, I was very encouraged and inspired by them. I took a lot of time to reflect, and seeing a Filipino organization speak out and stand in solidarity rather than silence that we're used to was really big for me. And for what's next for my research, I'm hoping, if it's possible, to have an internship with the FIRE and to continue to work with Anna, and hopefully get more guidance on how to conduct research and like narrowing down my topic. So yeah.
Our next presenter, and again, we can have a chat and discussion after everybody's presented. Our next presenter is Jasmine Reed. So I'll let you take it from here, Jasmine. You can share your screen.
Okay, hi, I'm Jasmine Reed. I'm going to my third year as a UIC student and in EHI. And my major is teaching of history. So hold on, let me figure out how to share my screen. Can everyone see everything? Okay, awesome. So this summer was really odd for me. I definitely overloaded myself with a lot of different work, and a lot of things were going kind of haywire. One of the things I did this summer was through the scholarship program that I'm a part of outside of UIC. I'm a part of Golden Apple Scholars of Illinois. So for people who are unfamiliar with Golden Apple, it's a program in Illinois that will have, it starts either when you're in high school or your first 2 years of college. You join the program, and it gives you teaching experience, essentially. We are all committed to teaching in schools of need in Illinois, all across Illinois, rural, urban, suburban. And so each summer we have an institute for 4 weeks where we teach in schools, summer schools and schools of need, and help the students there and gain teaching experience while also attending workshops and learning best practices to be incredible teachers. And so part of Golden Apple, we have a few core competencies. There's 5 of them, but the ones that I really wanted to focus on with this presentation is cultural competency and civic engagement. So I created a lesson plan for students. This would be for like high school history, US history. And this lesson was an attempt for me to take kind of what's going on contemporarily with a lot of the riots and uprisings that are happening in Chicago right now, and compared it to something that happened in history. So for this one, I talked about the Haymarket Square riot. This is just like me going through the lesson. I set lesson objectives because students like to know what's going on. They hate going into a presentation and there's no guidance. So this was just for me to have that for them. So understanding what happened, contextualizing the history, connecting it between what's happening now, and then analyzing that history, asking the questions that they need to ask of it. So here for one, high school students like pictures, so I put pictures in here, but I also wanted to show the depiction of the riot versus the memorial of the riot that is still here in Chicago, because I want the students to understand that even though we're talking about something in the past that has happened, there is physical evidence in this world still, in the city that they live, at least for the students that I was teaching, that's still here, something that we can call back on. So I found that really important. So I wanted to show the 2 pictures here, just to sort of like have that in the back of their head without them like overly thinking about it. And then I went through the history of what happened, just, some of the main bullet points of Haymarket Square. So I wanted the students to know that a civilian was killed and many others injured by the police. I wanted them to know what was going on, that they were protesting and striking in support of an 8-hour workday, and that this was not just unique to Chicago, but it was part of a larger national issue with labor. And then talking about what happened after that killing, that people gathered to protest police brutality, and then how it got out of control, right? An unknown person threw a bomb, how the police responded, and then what were the results. And then I have some more pictures, and I wanted to visually show who those protesters were. Because I think a lot of times we just say, yeah, people in Chicago, the workers, they were rioting, things happened, but we don't really know who those people are. And I wanted the students to at least see physically, like you see on the front lines here, that these are women. Like the first 3 people that you see are women here. And then you see people here getting off of the boat. I think that's police, but I can't see that well. And just sort of describing who these people are. And then in this slide, I want to talk about that these people were all immigrants, and talking about how they are, a minority group in Chicago during this time. And what are the consequences of having a minority group being the ones protesting against an oppressive power, which in this case is the police, and sort of just having them understand what that means. And this is my favorite slide. I just think it's cute. But I like talking about the impacts. So we had a rise of labor unions, but sort of, not exactly. Like the Knights of Labor were associated with this riot, and so they were looked at negatively, which led to the rise of the American Federation of Labor, which was far less radical than the Knights of Labor. And then we get May Day, which is an international holiday, but not celebrated in the United States, which is something for the students to think about, despite some of the inspiration for May Day starting with the Haymarket riot. And then the inspiration that this riot gave people, activists and artists all around the world. Just something to think about. And then I had a slide for them to have a discussion. And these were the questions I created for them. So how do we see the effects of the Haymarket affair present themselves today? And was the riot effective? Why or why not? And then consider the Black Lives Matter protests happening today. Are the contexts of each event similar or different? And then talking about using what you know about Haymarket and the riots that we've been seeing today, is a riot an effective way to create social or political change? And altogether with these questions and the discussion that I wanted the students to have, I wanted them to have a meaningful discussion and draw connections between the contemporary and the past by using evidence to support whatever path they decide to go on. Because I want students to consider how past events are related to current events beyond the cliche, don't repeat history or don't repeat past mistakes, but more so into beginning to see how the present is a consequence or consequences of past historical processes. And that's what I really wanted to get across in this lesson. And so going forward with my research into the next school year, I really want to focus more about focusing on how the present is a result of the past. And I really want to focus on labor and underrepresented groups in Chicago, because I think that's really important. And yeah, this is what I did for this summer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. That was absolutely fantastic. We had somebody chime in to say, your graphics are amazing, and somebody on chat said, I hope my son has a teacher like you in high school. Once again, great work. Our next presenter is Julie Herman from the College of, from CADA, from College of Art and Design.
Hi guys, can you hear me okay? Good, all right, cool. I'm gonna start by sharing my screen because I've got a presentation. Hold up. Alrighty. All right, so I broadly titled my research project for the summer, Error 404, Museum Not Found. So brief thing about me, my name's Julie. I'm a third year UIC student in the EHI. I'm an art history major with a minor in museum studies, and I'm also an interdisciplinary post-internet artist. So you might be wondering, what is post-internet? So post-internet can be defined as the artistic use of the internet as a mass medium and the translation of its content into a physical space. So this term is often debated and criticized because it privileges gallery presentation and display. So there's a lot of emphasis on having a physical space. So with arts practices related to the internet in mind, I developed my research plan around these books. A few of them directly address the politics of the internet, while others are more broadly tackling our consumption with media, including books, radio, television, and of course, artwork. So an important thing that I've learned this summer is that the term post-internet represents a continuously evolving critical dialogue. So there is no art after the internet, only during. So I felt like this quote was really prominent when thinking about quarantine and how our news and our entertainment and our connection with other people all kind of start to rely on this one tool that we use every day. So post-internet is also just a way of adapting and responding to the 21st century. So with the art world on lockdown, I decided to center my research around the survival of art communities in a digital landscape. So some of the questions that I've been considering are, how can social media mimic museum infrastructure? How does reliance on the internet in this socially distant moment help or hurt the art world? How has technology changed conventional fine art mediums and our understanding of visual culture? What aspects of curating need to change for the 21st century audience? And finally, if post-internet relies on gallery presentation, can we get rid of physical space altogether? So in moving from the physical to the digital, I developed my first online curatorial project, Suspension Galleries. Suspension Galleries is an Instagram exhibition centered around artists that were impacted by the pandemic. So to suspend is to prevent something from continuing. For example, my art practice was suspended, and it also means to hang something from somewhere. For example, my artwork was suspended on the wall. I felt that the word suspension was a really powerful metaphor for artists that had projects put on hold, had upcoming exhibitions canceled, and were in need of support to continue their practice. So for phase 1, each artist submitted 3 artworks along with an artist statement and a short anecdote about how their creative practice has changed during quarantine. And of course, they also gave any places that the audience could support them directly, such as websites, commission information, or online stores. The benefits of Suspension Galleries include that it is free and accessible from any device. There is no hierarchy of museum donors or high price tags on the artwork. There are no contractual agreements between artist and curator, so 100% of any sales go to the artist directly. Because of our intersecting demographics, we've built a network of artists supporting each other, and we're also able to react and respond in real time. So this last point really kind of highlights Suspension's ability to engage in progressive discourse about current events in a way that established institutions often struggle with, which brings me to museum activism. So when the protests began in June, museums tried to look their best on social media. Some offered to break their contract with a local police department. Many of them took a watered down stance by not addressing the Black Lives Matter movement directly, while others have remained deafeningly silent. But ironically, some museums have been very vocal about their allyship towards the Black community, all while completely ignoring their cultural history of looting and their lack of diversity in their staff and in their artwork. And most, if not all, Eurocentric museums have perpetuated white supremacy and the exoticization of non-white artists since their very conception. So with that going on in the world, Suspension Galleries kind of concluded phase 1 with the addition of promoting organizations and petitions, which then evolved into phase 2, expulsion. So typically following a suspension, expulsion is defined as the act of depriving someone membership in an organization or a permanent exclusion due to a violation of rules. And in order to decolonize the art world, we have to expel the entire structure of how art is consumed. So expulsion is highlighting Black, Indigenous, people of color, and LGBTQ+ artists that often face expulsion from traditional art spaces in order to continue building our network of support and also deconstruct these racist institutions. Further, I've also been working with Sophia Karachi, who is also presenting today, and Natalie Brookson, 2 other Engaged Humanities students, to develop another virtual gallery called The Void. The purpose of this project is to kind of embrace our collective uncertainty in this moment, showcasing engaged artwork that acts as an equal and opposite reaction to the pivotal events of 2020. So we're kind of hoping to gain an understanding of the online realm as both a medium and a platform, and kind of exploring the dichotomy of being an observer of the internet and a participant of the internet. So museums and the internet, I feel, are very similar in the ways that they mirror the world. I wanted to include this quote: "Because we live in a world shaped and defined by computation, it is one of the jobs of the critic and the artist to draw attention to the world as it truly is." I feel that it can be really difficult to filter the overwhelming information produced online every day, but it's my job as an academic creative to find these moments of protest and repression that are not only framed by the news media, but through the lens of social networks that are constantly reacting and responding. So in the future, I hope to work with museums potentially to advocate for turning their physical collections into a digital archive, with developments like virtual reality, we could make museums more accessible while also aiding in the repatriation of stolen artifacts. I believe that moving from the physical into the digital will ultimately result in the death of the colonial institution, the racist institution, and produce a more engaged environment for the arts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was amazing again. And we have a couple of people in the chat who I don't know if you saw are very excited by your really beautiful use of the word suspension. I hadn't been aware of that, and it really is a great term. So thank you so much for all of that. And our next presenter is Camilla Dastagoli, who I'll let you take it from here, Camilla.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to start by sharing my PowerPoint. So my project was on health and illness. I'm actually a third-year student right now, but I'm going to graduate a year early this year. My major is neuroscience, hence why I'm interested in health and also illness and the humanities. So first, let's start with talking about what is health humanities. It is a fairly new interdisciplinary field that incorporates humanities in medicine and public health. Previously, health humanities was assumed to be just humanities in the medicine, but it is really important to reflect on the public health portion as well. Health humanities is concerned with understanding the human condition of health and illness and the experience of pain in order to create knowledgeable and sensitive healthcare providers, patients, and family caregivers. Therefore, health humanities is not only concerned with training professionals, rather to educate the society as a whole. As a field, it draws on the methodologies for the humanities, fine arts, and social sciences to provide insight to people facing illness, which includes, again, patient, professional care providers, as well as those concerned with the suffering of the humans, like policymakers and government officials. What was the past of health humanities and how does it look like in the future? Traditionally, humanities have been used instrumentally within medicine to help teach communication and empathy skills, to expand on the patient's perspective and enlighten the patients and their families on how to cope with their experience of illness and pain. But the future trends that we would like to observe in the future of health humanities is to be able to develop health humanities related research methods and teaching the inherent value of the health humanities. I'm going to, later on, I'm going to share this PowerPoint, and you can have a set of links with more information on all of these topics if interested. So why is health humanities important? So through health humanities training, healthcare professionals can develop empathy for patients by cultivating ways to understand them as individuals who are more complex than their illness. So it's really important to, when we're talking about patients, we're usually focused on their pain and on their illness, but not their whole experience, the human experience that they're having. So advocates of humanities in medicine have constantly argued for practice of medicine that focuses on the social, family, and cultural life of patients to ensure that healthcare professionals are trained for cultural competence and awareness of health equity issues. So my projects, I actually worked on 2 projects, but my main project was the health and illness project. It was a writing project, and my mentor was Professor Sona. And the other project was Health Humanities Portraits, which was mentored by Professor Blackie. So the Health and Illness project was actually a part of a bigger project by my mentor that consists of 4 essays to reflect on patients' experience of dealing with illness and pain. The first essay that my mentor is going to talk about was basically what I worked on this summer, which is about the process of writing, why and how patients write. The second essay is the use of technology and machines in treating illness and how it affects humans. And third essay, logical experience after organ harvesting. And the fourth essay, which is really relevant to our current situation in the pandemic, is the effect of drugs and medications. Would it be a remedy or a poison? Which can also expand on notions of herd immunity and individual and public health. For this project, I analyzed 20 articles which talked about patients' writings through blogs and books and how that actually helped them to deal with their pain and their family caregivers. The next project was the Health Humanities Portraits. First, I want to talk about why and what is Health Humanities Portrait and why is it important. So the power of narration is limited within the marginalized communities. We can always see that by the lack of people of color or marginalized individuals, individual writers, and that actually speaks about the experiences that we're not able to wholly see because we don't have the narrators. So the imbalance of power first applies to our academia and then our healthcare system, both directly and as a consequence of our education system. This unfair representation of perspectives can shape and alter the society's perception of these individuals. And by demanding to know everyone's stories without the shadows of stereotypes, biases, and personal perspectives, we can limit the misrepresentation of marginalized identity. If we as a society stop telling stories, we are then embodied with misery, oppression, and ignorance. So by utilizing storytelling and public health information, we can bring humanity to statistics. This is why health humanities portraits are important because this is a way that allows the healthcare professionals to reflect on structural problems within the healthcare field and also persuade officials, government officials to implement systemic changes. This also, again, allows both groups, both the healthcare professionals and the officials, to identify and explore different influences on patients' lives and how they can improve that. So what I mainly did for this project, which is still a work in progress, was designing health humanities portraits with the sub-theme of health and illness and the topics of social justice and intersectional identities in the healthcare system. So the use of these portraits is actually an educational tool for students in the healthcare field, from medical students to nursing students at UIC, to enhance their understanding of the patient's experiences. So why is it important again? Because when we hear people, this is just an example, when we hear people with low socioeconomic status are disproportionately receive less healthcare services, that doesn't really paint a picture in our heads. We don't actually know about their individual experiences, but by creating a portrait, we can actually use the power of narration to talk about an individual who went through the process. It might not be the process, it might not be the experience of everyone in the same shoes, but it still talks about the systemic issues that they can face. And this allows us to bring the humanities to the statistics, and it actually makes more sense for the society as a whole to understand what is wrong in the system itself and how they can improve it. So my EHI experience this summer, so thanks to my summer experience as an Engaged Humanities Initiative student, I became a more involved and engaged citizen of this world. I started reading a lot, especially throughout the BLM movements. I understood the urgency to become an educated ally and advocate. I read two books that I really highly recommend. One is Are Prisons Obsolete? And the other one is Who Do You Serve and Who Do You Protect? And then just more about my experience, I wrote annotated bibliographies on 20 articles, which taught me how to phrase and analyze a writing piece. And then I was also able to speak about and reflect on the issues I deemed important personally, from the struggles of the essential workers in the pandemic to global inequality and other healthcare issues that patients face. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camilla. We have a question in chat, but we'll get to it after everybody's presented. But thank you so much. That was really lovely, and again speaks to how the humanities can be helpful in our current situation. So thanks. Our next presenter is Melania Stevenson. So I'll let you share your screen and present.
Okay, hi. I'm Melania, and I'm a junior now here at UIC, and I'm currently studying a lot of different things that still have to be sorted out. So I won't be getting into that today. And so I'll just jump right into my presentation now. And here we go. Okay, so my project is named The Bridge into the World of Music, and how I came about this issue. So in other countries, people listen to music from their country, and in addition, English music. So music is a universal language, so why is it so hard to hear music from other countries? Here in the US, you rarely hear a song that is not in English on the radio. Spanish language songs appear every now and then. Korean language songs are given a radio spin or two throughout their whole lifetime, but nothing truly substantial is done for any of these songs. And so people from Western countries like the US and the UK, for example, are not well versed in the world of music, and people in other countries, they listen to music from their country in addition to American, Canadian, and English artists, as you can see on the slide. As a person who listens to mainly non-English music, I found it difficult as well to find different curated playlists and different types of articles to base my research on. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for a person who listens to majority English music to find songs and everything from different artists that is not in English. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is the inclusion of charting, since that's actually very important for music consumption here in America. So historically, only about 20 songs starting from 1958 have reached the top 10 on our music songs chart, the Billboard Hot 100. And that's a song that showcases which songs are consumed through sales, radio, and streaming. And there are worldwide hits in other languages, but they barely ever break the sort of barrier over to the Western music market here in America and the UK, for example. And apps like TikTok, it's helping out a bit since random like videos and stuff with these songs can go viral, but that hasn't really carried over to our music charts for non-English songs. So we still have a long way to go about that. And what I want to change. So the issue in countries like the US is that there's a barrier in the music industry that creates a difficulty for branching out musically for people who are interested. So there's a lot of music that we're missing out on here in America if we are just the type of person to tune in on the radio or just to click on a random curated playlist on a streaming app like Spotify. So I wanted to start this project because there's a fault in our system in our Western music industry. There's a lot of gatekeeping that keeps the public from branching out. Through music, people can gain a glimpse into other cultures of the world. Through beats and lyrics that feature symbols unique to a culture, it's an enriching experience that is difficult for the Western society to introduce ourselves to. So that's really why I wanted to create this project, because as a person who loves world music, like different music in other like languages, I listen to about 90% of the time. So not being able to hear it on the radio because radio hosts don't like to play things that aren't in English a lot of the time. So it's very hard to listen to these sorts of songs and everything. Even though there's a demand for it, they don't play it. And that's a problem that I think should be tackled. And why the bridge? It was sort of, I came up with it because it was a metaphorical bridge, because I literally wanted to bridge the gap between music and people from other countries. So say like being from America, we often don't listen to music from other countries. So it's sort of like introducing a nice little bridge so that people can easily get the chance to listen to other music. And another fun fact about the bridge is that Professor Rosenberg, the professor who's my mentor on this project now, she pointed out that my project was named The Bridge, and she got like the first meaning that I explained to her. And then she pointed out that a bridge is also a portion of a song. And I hadn't thought about that. And it was like such a mind-blowing moment how I completely just passed over that, because it's right there. But I really love that little point because I feel like it really brings in the meaning of the bridge even more. And with the bridge, I began my project with 3 countries of interest: Nigeria, Colombia, and South Korea, all representing different continents. So I wanted to make sure that I picked 3 different continents that really represents a mass of the people of color around the world. So I would like to add on more regions of interest in this project in the future. And I've decided on a few different regions of interest that I was going to look between. So that's something that I'm thinking about for the future, but I'll talk more about that a bit later. And one of the features that I came up with is, so far I wanted to create one of the features, which is an interactive map that includes all of the different countries and continents, and also a search bar. So if you want to pick on a random country, like say Nigeria, for instance, or type Nigeria into the search bar, you'll be brought straight to the country search, where it showcases all of the music from that country, like new releases and some of the big artists on the rise. And I thought that that was like a really good feature to create. And another feature I wanted to create, because collaboration is a huge thing like nowadays. And one of the things with charting on American charts is the majority of the songs that have recently charted on the Hot 100 Top 10 are collaborations with Western artists. And it's sort of a backdoor way for artists from different countries to enter the charts and enter really the American music scene. And that's sort of like a nice little touch on, if a person doesn't know where to start with music, they could look at this collaboration tab and see, hey, like this artist went and collaborated with a Western artist that I'm aware of, and I may have heard this song before. That's an easy starting point to get into that artist. And also the collaboration panel would include different artists from that same country. So if you're finally getting into a certain artist in, say, Nigeria with Burna Boy, then you could get into lesser known artists from that country and really go through a pipeline of sorts. And so far with these regions, I've gotten a whole list of different artists. So for Nigeria, I found out the artists Techno, Wavy, Tiwa Savage, Burna Boy, and Wizkid. And the last 2 of sorts are very popular artists, it seems. Like in the last couple of years, they've had very high scale collaborations with big artists in the West. So a lot of people are hearing about them increasingly. In Colombia, I have Maluma, J Balvin, Shakira, and Karol G, for instance. And the first 3 have been worldwide known throughout the last few years, especially with Shakira throughout the last decade. So those are the artists I have for Colombia. And with Korea, South Korea, I have BTS, Blackpink, Twice, NCT 127, ITZY, and Monsta X. And the person who most people probably associate with Korea and with K-pop is Psy, with his global hit Gangnam Style and his later hit Gentleman. So that really started out like the whole traveling across the world with music, with Korean music. And what's next is, so I want to start off with creating my blog for this fall semester. And really getting that solidified before I can start out my next regions that I would like to enter into, which I was thinking of choosing between China or India for the Asian area, Puerto Rico or Brazil for the South American region, and South Africa for the African region. And throughout my research so far, I've collected a lot of different like curated playlists from Spotify, Apple Music, and Tidal. And I've collected a bunch of articles from Billboard, Guardian, Complex, Vogue, NME, The Atlantic, CNN, and Rolling Stone. And I've gotten a few different like studies and case studies. For one, about a Harvard case study about K-pop. And another one is a poll centered around consumption of music in 4 music markets in Africa, including Nigeria. And I'm really searching for expanding upon this idea, and hopefully by the end of my project that I have a bunch more different regions of study for it. And yeah, that's all.
Great, thanks so much, Melania. And I hope, you know, as a final project, we will need to have an EHI dance party, I think, with some of these fantastic things that you're going to be putting on your blog. And so last but very, very much not least, Sophia Karachi, I'll let you share your screen and get us going. There you go.
So for my summer research, I was pursuing coffee and coffee culture. How I got into this was about 2 years ago. I had the privilege of being in Professor Heather Doble's 161 course, Food and Culture. And so I wrote this paper about the issue of world obesity and also starvation, and how are these things happening at the same time, and also how is malnutrition associated with obesity, all of these health factors. At the time, I was a nutrition major, and although writing has always been my passion, I was not a declared English major at that point. So this seems like a great way for me to really explore both of my passions. I later switched over to English major, so now I have a lot more writing courses, but Professor Heather Doble was the one who directed me to the EHI and said, I think this could be a great way for you to like pursue this project and really learn more about it. So kind of while doing this, I realized there's so many projects and books that explore the topic of food and culture. I wanted to do something a little more specific, and so I got directed towards coffee culture. And specifically the westernized obsession with like productivity and how caffeine is used as a stimulant for this, and it's advertising everywhere, it's all in the media. While starting my research and looking more into this, I realized there's a lot of social inequalities that went along with coffee and coffee production. Its issues on biodiversity and its implications on the environment and environmental degradation. And so the question I wanted to focus on was, how has the evolution of coffee impacted social, political, and economic situations throughout history? So my first step in this was to build some background. So I was instantly attracted to documentaries or reading material that kind of obviously and upfront dealt with coffee production, consumption, and transportation around the globe. So the 3 main sources that I'll be talking about for this part is the book Coffee Culture, Local Experiences, Global Connections, the documentary Connected by Coffee, and the New York Times article, The War on Coffee. So for Coffee Culture, Local Experiences, Global Connections, for anyone who's interested, like remotely, I would definitely recommend reading parts of this book. It explores every aspect of coffee with how it's spread across the globe, different methods of production, from both an agricultural standpoint and a consumer standpoint. It debated popular health topics regarding coffee, the fair trade movement, the evolution of the coffee house and its social effects. And one thing that I really picked up on from this, so it called my attention that coffee is the second most traded product globally, second to petroleum. And petroleum is used to fund industry and transportation, whereas coffee also fuels, but it fuels the labor that we need behind it. So that was what I took from that first source. The second source, Connected by Coffee, was a 2014 documentary. It outlined the history and the current state of coffee production in both Mexico and Nicaragua. So it focused a lot on the fair trade movement and the concept of co-op productions. I had some background on the fair trade movement, but this documentary really outlines that it's quite simple to actually get certified for free trade. And just hearing free trade or fair trade on a label does not actually ensure that this is a humane production or way of purchasing something. So it educated me a lot on co-ops, which are basically small coffee plantations that team up together and work together to sell their coffee. And in that way, they're much more likely to have ongoing business relations. What was interesting about this documentary was that in Nicaragua, it was the people who had their coffee plantation were soldiers, and they were actually farming on the land that they once fought on. And so for them, this had like a huge spiritual connection to the land. They had so many deep memories there, and it was turning it from a place of like horrible memories to a place of something they could own and continue to grow their life on. In Mexico, it talked more about only women-owned co-op. And so it was very empowering to see that all these women who escaped horrible conditions were able to work together and create a sense of community. So that was that documentary. And then The War on Coffee was actually an article featured in the New Yorker from this past April. So this was kind of the complete opposite of the documentary. Instead of focusing so much on how the westernized world has kind of demanded and created horrible conditions for these workers, it created the concept of a manufactured codependence and basically stated that this craving for coffee in westernized areas was not natural. It's not something that just occurred. It occurred through media and the force, social value of labor that we place on ourselves. Within the 40-hour work week, within all this emphasis on production and not wasting time, it's created like a westernized point of view that we feel obligated to consume coffee and other caffeinated things in order to be productive, just as people farming the coffee feel obligated to produce it. So my findings from this, the first is that food is always about more than simply what fills the stomach. This reiterated that food is a marker of identity. While it doesn't necessarily create it, it helps sculpt it. The fetishism of commodities is basically, it was coined by Karl Marx, and it's the separation of a producer from a consumer. It states that when you consume a product without knowing where it came from, you're denying any knowledge of the conditions that went into it. It's very common here. We don't think about where our food comes from. And I think that's a huge issue and something I hadn't previously thought about, especially when I'm purchasing something fair trade. I would automatically assume, oh, this is, fair, it's just, there's no reason for me to look into it, which is not always true. The third point that I have already kind of mentioned was this quote: "American workers are just as compelled to drink coffee as Central American peasants are to produce it." Kind of the connection, they are so geared towards this way of life of producing this, but we are so geared towards we have to drink it to maximize productivity at all times. Because if we're not being productive, then like, are we even American? And then transforming a tool of oppression into a tool of empowerment. This went along with the documentary of everyone who was turning their previously oppressive working conditions into something that they can own and be proud of and take charge of. So for the second part of my research, I was working with Professor Raphael McGarrick, and he challenged me to read materials that were sort of out of left field. They didn't obviously talk about coffee, but they pertained to my work in some way or another. So the first thing he recommended reading was Nature's Metropolis, which is sort of an older text, but he challenged me to read a chapter on grain, just to kind of understand how to structure the concept of food across space and time. And also how to think about the concept of coffee as a commodity rather than just this abstract thing. So although this reading was very dense for me, it did help me think a lot about how I would like to structure a text or a paper going forward for my research. It coins the term agro-industrialization, and which is basically to the process of industrializing agriculture, which is what happened with coffee. It made me consider questions such as, how were agricultural methods developed? How does production influence population in particular areas? Why are some places notorious for better coffee? And how did new inventions evolve and impact coffee production and the coffee market? The second source that I read was The Mushroom at the End of the World. So I actually read this entire book, which was challenging. It explored the Matsuzaki mushroom and the relationship between its hunters and gatherers. So this text was much different than Nature's Metropolis because while it did include a lot of just background information and straight facts, it was also heavily composed of personal narratives. It challenged me to think about how different perceptions of smell correlate to culture and identity. It talked about how a lot of people, when smelling this mushroom, would think it is disgusting, but that was because they were not exposed to such smells in their own culture. And this mushroom was very heavily valued in Asian cultures and many other cultures as well. It detailed the relationship between buyers and sellers, which also relates to coffee. It challenged me to think about what determines the grade of a coffee. Why is one considered superior to the other? How war impacts farming and agriculture, and the alienation within the capitalistic system and the process of consumerism. So yeah, why are some places notorious for better coffee? There are two main methods for producing coffee, and while one is not harmful to the environment because it's produced in rainforests and needs the shade of trees, the mass population prefers the sun-grown method, which is very harmful to the environment. The alienation within capitalism and consumerism, us not knowing where our products come from and feeling pressure to consume as well as produce something. The concept of sustainable development, which basically, how can we move forward with something that will not have negative future implications? So part B was trying to think, how can I make this more tangible? So my thought for this was to go to different cafes throughout Chicago and different Chicago neighborhoods and search cafes that are either within fair trade, have unique blends, the focus on coffee houses and their social aspects within different neighborhoods and these socioeconomic implications. While I started this project during the spring and worked towards it through then, with the COVID-19 situation, many cafes were closed for a few months, and even now that they're opening, not many have outdoor seating or they have restrictions. So it's been difficult for me to move forward with this phase of the project. I wanted to create, similar to Millennia, an interactive map. I wanted to do the CTA map that Chicago is known for, but put different cafes instead of train stops. And I wanted to kind of be able to zoom in, select a cafe, read about it, its information, and have sort of a website for that. I'm still working towards this since there's still restrictions on where I can go. Going forward, I'm not sure completely that I want to continue with this project, but it's very disappointing because I did have more events lined up, such as Counterculture Coffee. They have a tasting, or they had a tasting every Friday morning, completely free to the public, but they would try different blends and explain to you where it came from, how they're partnered with these co-ops. And so I was thinking that would be a great opportunity. However, right now, they're no longer doing this. And then the Two Brothers Coffee Tour Roastery. I was talking about my research and somebody overheard me and said, oh, hey, I know someone who works at this roastery. They would love to give you a tour. If you just ask, they really want to like reach out to the public. And this was actually back last November. And so I wanted to wait until I was more into my research and knew what I wanted to ask and what to focus on before I scheduled this tour. However, then COVID-19. And so I have been kind of putting it off because I don't think right now would be the best time to go and explore this. So if I do continue with this project, I would love to do these things. And that's all for now.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophia. And thank you again to all of the students. And I think we can all, you know, even with that crazy Zoom clapping emoji or whatever, I'm just really, as I was every time we had a check-in session, I'm just really impressed and humbled by really how much work you've all done this summer. And like I said, this is just 6 of the students. We have 7 more who were also doing summer projects this summer. So for the first year, we're off to a really great start. And I would also just encourage, I know there are some faculty members and in attendance. If you'd like to become involved with the EHI, you can be a mentor, you can teach a class, you can join the working group. Just shoot us an email at ehi@uic.edu. I can put that in the chat. Yes, exactly. If you'd like to have an opportunity to contribute to these fantastic projects and these great students. And it's just really, I know Mark will agree with me, it's really exciting to see this quality and of undergraduate research in the humanities because it's just great to see all of your work. And I'd also just like to announce that on October 6th at 10 a.m., and we will record it, so if you can't make it then, but our fall Mellon lecture in the Engaged Humanities will be by Neil Lester, who is the director of the Project Humanities, the amazing Project Humanities program at Arizona State University. And he'll be talking about humanities and the entrepreneurial humanist. Deliberately provocative. So we'll be sending out announcements about that, but I encourage everybody to join us there. So yes, we're getting great things in the chat. And I think Marcia Cassidy actually had a question for Camilla about whether health humanities narratives could help because we're about to face the possibility of a COVID vaccine, and there's a lot of fear and resistance around that. And Camilla, what are your thoughts about how humanities could help with that scenario, if you'd like to address that?
Yeah. That's actually a great question. So when we talk about health and illness, we usually focus on the perspectives of the healthcare professionals or government agencies like the CDC but we don't really look into the communities that go through the illness and their experiences. So I believe, yes, I believe that health narratives can help paint a picture of what it's like to suffer and actually survive in a pandemic. So by bringing humanities by bringing humanities to the morbidity and mortality rates of COVID-19, and through personal narratives, we can address the issues concerning vaccinations, and we can talk about persuading individuals who are not really so sure of going through the process, but because of sharing the hardships of those who actually suffered because of COVID-19, they might be persuaded to get the vaccine. That's what I think.
Great. And then I'm reading the chat. Mark Canuel had a question. First, he said, and I completely agree, all of these are so wonderful and fascinating projects. And for Julie Herman, to what extent are you still interested in supporting traditional art media like painting and sculpture, or would you like to see everything go digital?
I think that's a great question, especially when thinking about, post-internet's definition of kind of the whole point of it is taking the internet as kind of your source material and then bringing it into a physical realm. So I think that all like traditional fine art mediums are still necessary, like they haven't become obsolete or anything, but I also think that because we're not able to go to a museum right now in the middle of a pandemic, that I definitely think that there's some work that institutions have to do in making their physical collections accessible online and kind of changing the way that we view an art museum as a whole. I mean, I don't think that all digital art, like art just doesn't need to be digital, but I definitely think that because we're all kind of faced with just being on the internet right now, that we need a little bit more access to seeing these things that exist within a physical space.
Fantastic. And Laura Hostetler had a question for anybody who'd like to chime in. And I know some of you spoke about this, but what have you learned about the research process itself? And what kinds of tips would you have for current second year students when they begin to design summer research projects for 2021? And that also sounds like something that we could actually even draw up as a guide, right, for the students who are just starting their second year in the fall. So anybody would like to speak to that, just unmute yourself and chime in.
I would say, as cliche as it sounds, not all progress is linear. I know that for me personally, I have gone back and forth, like even with being passionate about this project, whether or not I would like to continue pursuing it. And also something I mentioned earlier as well, my first thought was to like read and consult sources that were like so obviously about my topic. But once I took a step back and was reading things that like worked around it, I actually felt like I gained a lot more insight into how to frame something and how to actually produce some kind of work based on my research.
That's really great advice, actually. That's fantastic. Yeah, anybody else?
Yeah, I would say for me, nothing really went as planned this summer, but to sort of kind of do what feels natural. I think for me, everything that I've done this summer, from either Golden Apple as the Institute or just things that I've done on my own or with my family in supporting Black Lives Matter or anything like that, has also like helped inform something that I ended up wanting to do later. So which is doing all the things that feel natural to you and taking in everything that's going on around you, instead of sort of ignoring it to shove your head in a book to try to produce something that you think is research, but rather just take everything in and create something from that.
I have one thing. I also think it's important to have some kind of planning. Definitely because of the COVID-19 and some problems, I wasn't able to follow along with all of my plans, but it was at least good to give me an idea on what I'm actually working towards. So it's really good to know, like, at least have a weekly plan. At least this week, I'm going to read this. And if I don't finish reading it, there is a secondary thing that I can do, so you don't feel burned out by all the reading and writing. Yeah.
Anybody else? This is all really great advice. I'm going to rewatch this and write all of this down and give it to the fall.
I agree with Camilla in the sense that kind of setting your books or your readings that you kind of want to engage in is a really great starting place. But I've found that, especially with the Engaged Humanities, like we've brought up, this is an engaged practice. We're kind of taking in this moment and reacting to it, that research kind of happens to you. So if you're at least reading something and having other people's scholarly words to kind of look on, you can apply them to what's going on in your real life outside of research. So I found that that's really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Sarah Buckmeyer just said I hope you're all reading the chat, because people are saying wonderful things about you, justifiably. And Sarah Buckmeyer, who will be one of the TAs in the fall semester. So hi, Sarah. And she says, and Jasmine, your presentation made me think of the Pullman labor strike in 1894, the ways the Pullman porters, who were the African-American workforce at the Pullman Company, were excluded from Railway Workers Union. I'm curious if you came across anything related to that as you researched the Haymarket riot.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of overlap there, but I chose to focus more so on the events of Haymarket because I felt like it fit better for a high school student understanding for what I was gonna do. But going forward, I want to look more exclusively at labor and marginalized communities in Chicago specifically. So that's something I would like to look at more as I go into the next school year.
Yeah. All right, so we are bumping right up against 12:30. I just want to thank again, really from the bottom of my heart, everybody at the Institute for the Humanities, the provost, everybody, a lot of you, like I said, I see a lot of you in the attendees, all of you who support the Engaged Humanities Initiative and have helped out and come to the working group, teach a class, become a mentor. If you're not doing that and you want to find out how, just send us an email at ehi@uic.edu. And oh my goodness, the mentors have really been absolutely fantastic this summer. This has not been an easy summer for anybody, and the mentors have just been really wonderful in guiding our students and helping them do the amazing work that you see here. And most of all, first and foremost, the incredible Engaged Humanities students who just really are an inspiration and a reminder of why I love my job every now and then, and really makes it all worthwhile. And I've learned so much already from all of you, and I really look forward to seeing where you take these projects in the future and welcoming our new second year students who will be in the fall. We have two fall seminars, one with Johari Jabir on the beloved community and Black music. I've just saw the syllabus, it looks incredible. There's still lots of room, so if you have students or friends who might be interested in joining EHI, please let them know. There's still room to join Johari's class, and there's still some room in Laura Hostetler's class. She will be reteaching the wonderful seminar on border crossings, narratives of displacement and belonging. So once again, thank you all so very, very much. We'll take a break, and especially the students, you've let yourself take a break. You've done a lot of work this summer. Thanks again so much, and I look forward to seeing everybody at the next session.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your questions, and thank you again to our students for those fantastic presentations. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back at 1. Thanks a lot.